help us understand the 4.02% employment rate that has just been announced by the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security. Is it a good number?
It is a very low number, yes.
And but some people are saying the employment number that China releases is not in the same concept as the Western employment number. Is there a, or is that really the reality that we're seeing here, 4%?
I doubt about it. I think the definition of unemployment rate, I think, is the same.
Mr. Tang?
Probably a little bit different in terms of some rural migrants. For example, the farmer, they find a job in urban area, but if they have a difficulty, they go back to their villages.
Will they be counted in the system?
If they are not registered, and usually will not fully counted, because many of them, if it's not, do not have a very good statistics, particularly for the marginal in the county and all those places.
Yeah. Now, I think it's quite remarkable that for 4 consecutive years, China has been able to achieve such achievement. I mean, 30 million people, to give 30 million people jobs amid a slowing down economy. How do you think China managed to do that?
Well, I think create a new job or create enough new jobs, I think that's a local government's effort. Everywhere you go, you'll hear people talk about how they need to pay much more effort to create new jobs for next year, predict there will be new labor force into the market. So I think it is for a long time, China's economic growth has considered with employment, not only because of resource.
Mr. Tang?
Yeah, as an economist, we always talk about the structure change, right? In the past many years, and how many years, and probably in China's the whole economic structure change is service sector grows very fast, and manufacturing, agriculture reducing, that growth rate reducing, right? But service sector need more labors. So that's why maybe overall economic growth is not that high, but because the service sector, which is quite a labor intensive area, grows faster than the others. So then we create more job. The other thing is China now is not, we have too much employment. In fact, our major problem now is a shortage of labor. A lot of factories they cannot find.
Why do we have that problem?
Yeah, one area is because in the past few years we do have the labor force reducing, and second one is a lot of young people. They don't want to working in the factories and manufacturing assembly lines because they feel very boring. They would rather to doing some service sector and working for more exciting area. So now, overall, particular service, the manufacturing sector will have a difficult to find laborers.
Now, at the same time, a lot of companies are also recruiting, having higher standard in their recruitment. For instance, they don't want to have graduates who are from college. They want to have people who have master degrees or even doctor degrees. What is behind that? I mean, are we having too many college students to begin with?
Well, I think depends on the structure of the industry, right? The different companies need different talent. I don't think college students are not needed anymore, but I think it's because they are looking for some jobs they wanted to work with. However, the market may not satisfy them, so they're spending a longer time to looking for a job.
Now, Mr. Tang, you were one of the people who initiated the increase of enrollment to Chinese colleges and universities, and nowadays some people seem to be blaming you for the difficulty of graduates looking for jobs. How do you explain that?
But number one is actually the college graduate majority, most of them find a job, because we have a statistics from some newspapers, news media reports say a lot of college students cannot find job. Actually, it's not true. And China now, the statistics shows by the end of the year, usually 93% of people, the college students find a job. The rest of them, and many of them, they're waiting for the graduate schools or go abroad. They're preparing something. The real unemployment of that is around less than 3%, right? And you look globally, the college student, that 3% is actually not very high unemployment. But some of them, they don't like their job, and then we find out the job changing very quickly, because they have a very high expectation, high income expectation. When you start to work, they think they don't like it, they drop out. More than 30% people, in the half years, they change another job. That job turnover rate is very high, but this is another story. So unemployment rate from the college graduates is not that high, but because those young people have a higher demand, have better opportunities, they are like turnover. This is the current case.
Yes, let's have some international input here, and I have Mr. Mike Bastin, who is senior lecturer from Southampton Solent University, joining us from London. Thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Now, we have heard the latest figures coming from China that for 4 consecutive years, 30 million people have been able to find jobs. How do you look at this figure, and what do you think it represents, given that China's economy has been slowing down? The growth rate for last year was 6.7%, much slower than the double-digit growth we had many years ago.
Yes, and 6.9% the year before. I mean, the figure of 30, I think it's 13.14 million jobs created, I think is rather impressive. The target was, I think, 10 million, so it's well in excess of that. The urban unemployment rate is down 4.02%, less than the target 4.5%. So I think it's steady. It's no real cause for concern. But as has been echoed by the other panelists, it certainly is a job market that's under pressure. Obviously, a lot of state-owned enterprise reform, I think, will continue. There's overcapacity, so there will be laid off workers, and university students will be looking for better jobs with a lot of training. So I think the way forward is it's really reform of the economy, focus on premium brands, high investment, high training, quality training inside Chinese companies, and that's what we need to see more of, particularly outside the first-tier cities. So there need to be attractive opportunities in second and third tier cities. So we need I think a slight cultural change in Chinese companies, where training and investment in staff is put first and not low cost and low price.
Yeah, well, you have been observing China's employment situation for quite a while. You understand that, for instance, young people would want to work in better jobs. They don't want to go and do those dirty jobs that bring them less money, and they want to go to first-tier cities, as you mentioned, Beijing, Shanghai, the big cities, although these big cities are already way too big to welcome, to accommodate all of these people. How do you look at the differences of the employment trend in China and that in your country and in Europe or in the United States, for instance?
Well, there are differences, but there are similarities. I mean, the employment figures in the US still remain relatively, the unemployment figures relatively low. And in the UK, there's not a real cause for concern. But the difference with China and Chinese companies, and I think this is the reason why a lot of university students, Chinese university students, particularly graduating overseas, prefer to work for a foreign company, a famous foreign brand. And I think that the reason for that is the training. I don't think it's so much the salary, it's the training and career development that they see there that has been in place for quite some time. So I think that the trend that we need to see now in China's economy and Chinese companies is much more emphasis on training and career development and a more sort of Western outlook for these companies, more internationally expansive. And we are seeing that with Chinese companies and Chinese brands now becoming successfully globally, obviously Lenovo, Huawei, high technology. So I think that, again, the way forward is for Chinese companies to look inside Western companies and offer the training and investment in staff much more.
Yeah, Mr. Tang, do you agree with Mike's assessment just now?
Yeah, I think I more or less agreed. And China's economic structure and a little bit different with the other countries, right? But currently, unemployment is not a major concern in Chinese economy. In fact, for the manufacturing, particularly, there was shortage of labor.
Mm-hmm. And Madam Zheng, your input?
Well, I think I agree that in-job training is very important. And on the other way, say that the extension of college enrollment actually benefited from that. I will benefit that because if you imagine those college graduates, they will work for 30 years. So they need to update their knowledge. And they are in better position to update their knowledge.
Mm-hmm. One very important piece of information that came out just yesterday was that China announced it's going to cut additional 500,000 jobs from the coal and steel industry on top of the over 725,000 China already relocated last year. How do you look at the importance of this work for China at this moment, Mr. Tang?
And it's important for economic reform and the structural reforms. But in terms of unemployment, not that significant, right? And 500,000 compared with the 50 million create, 14 million created every year, this 500,000 is not a big problem. Compared with 1990s, end of 1990s, when those days we have major reform, a major layoff, we lay off more than 10 million people, right? Mm-hmm. And those days, a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises is closing down. That period is very problematic, but now it's not a major problem. But still, this is 500,000 people, and if they lose their job, we need to give a training, need to give a settlement, and we need to help them. And government prepare a huge amount of money to doing that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, the Chinese government has been lauded for the kind of effort it has put in to try to give training to the people who have been laid off so that they can adapt to future job market. Mike, let me come back to you now. In contrast, we know that President Donald Trump just gave his first speech to Congress the other day where he said he's going to bring dying industries roaring back to life, and he's vowing to revive America's long-ailing coal and steel industry. What do you look at the contrast in employment policies between these two countries?
Well, there's a complete contrast in those industries, in coal and steel. Obviously, in the case of China, there is massive overcapacity. So these job cuts, I'm afraid, are a necessary evil. Obviously, as painlessly as possible is the way forward. Retraining, job clubs, really supporting laid-off workers and encouraging them to start their own business. And I think I would praise the Chinese central government in that respect. This wave of entrepreneurialism now, which is sweeping China, is very much supported by the central government. And that's not really what's coming out of President Trump's rhetoric, and what he actually means when it comes to the American industries is still very, very unclear. And we have to wait and see. But in terms of the Chinese government, certainly huge efforts have been made, and I think the way forward is very, very clear. And an important point to note on this, on restructuring overcapacity and restructuring state-owned enterprises, that will attract more foreign direct investment, and that's very, very important for the Chinese economy, and that will create jobs. It's that wave of FDI that really sparked the economic miracle back in 1979, 1980, and that's what we need to see again.